Shame. How do we move beyond shame? How do we move beyond being shamed as a child? How do we move beyond not feeling enough as a child? How, as men, do we step into a healthy version of what it means to be a man? Today's video is about that. It's about moving beyond our perceived limitations that have been placed on us by our environment, particularly by our parents or our primary caregivers. So I received a question from a female therapist, and I want to go ahead and read that. And I want to go into this question, and it's very specifically related to young boys moving into adulthood, being adults, and having that sense of, I don't feel enough. I feel lost. I don't feel like a man. What does it mean to be a man? I don't feel that I'm connected to my healthy sense of masculinity. So let me read the question out. Hi Stephanos, thank you for the work that you do, deeply appreciated. Question, I'm a female therapist who works with a young male who is 14 years old. His dad was highly manipulative to him growing up, a lot of abandonment wounding. Often would tell my client that if he didn't become a rock climber, fisher, or some kind of outdoorsman, he would be ashamed of him. My client said he's continually told him that he never wanted to be any of those professions, and his father proceeded to tell my client that he should be ashamed of himself and said he'd take back his last name so my client wouldn't taint his family name. I could go on, but my question for you is this. As a female therapist, I know I can hold space for him and allow him to tell his story with love and compassion, but there is a part of me that feels having a male therapist would be so much more powerful for him due to his father wounding. Any advice on how I can support this young man as a female therapist? That's a really powerful question, and I definitely feel compassion and empathy for this young boy, for this man, this boy that's transitioning into adulthood and who's at a very precarious stage of his development. And when I say precarious and dangerous, it can go one of two ways. He's been deeply shamed by someone that he's more than likely as he's looked up to. He's looked to this man, to his father, for guidance and for support. To not be shamed and ridiculed and judged, but rather be supported. Help him navigate and explore the world in a healthy way. Construct healthy boundaries for him, and at the same time, construct healthy challenges for him to grow. And this hasn't happened. So this young man that's on the precipice of becoming a young man and being in the world and also sharing himself with the world, he's about to make some big decisions. Now, it's amazing that he's getting support from a therapist, female or male. Not super relevant right now, but the fact that he has support is great. And so the initial guidance that I want to provide here is compassion, empathy, and non-judgment. This is super, super important for this young man. And I agree with this female therapist. He needs both a very compassionate, nurturing, solid, dependable female figure and also a male figure in his life. And so what this female therapist can continue to do is continue to hold that space. I'm in deep in some shamanic training today, and we were speaking about holding space and discernment, the ability to act, to know how to act, when to act, and the ability to hold space. And for me, that is seeing the other person with non-judgment, coming from our truth, clearing our vessel, making sure that we are clear of past and pain and fear and any hindrance, anything that's holding us back, clearing that up within us so that we are full of emptiness. I know it's a paradox, right? But we can give freely to that young man that's in dire straits, that is feeling ashamed for wanting to express himself in a way that his father doesn't approve of. And so that female therapist, she can immediately hold space in non-judgment by making sure that her cup is full, making sure that she's fully present to him so that that young boy energetically feels that. He feels safe with her. That's an amazing starting point. Something else that is very important is that this young man must be in the presence of other healthy masculine men. Maybe the suggestion is there that he goes to a YMCA. Maybe it's that he joins a sporting team if he's not already part of one, so that he can have coaches and assistant coaches that are there providing insight and guidance and support. Maybe it's being surrounded by uncles or other older adults that are in the neighborhood, in the vicinity, where he can lean against for guidance, where he can go to for assistance. Clearly, this father is wounded himself. For him to say those things, he is stuck in judgment and rigidity. Now, that doesn't excuse his behavior, but it helps us understand where he's coming from. And so, as a therapist, she can guide this young boy and create opportunities for this young boy to be surrounded by, if it's possible for her to do that, of course, to be surrounded by other healthy male figures. See, there's a relatability that takes place. When we talk about men's work and we talk about women's work, and both are very important, and also co-ed work is important, just human work together is important. However, there's a familiarity that we have specifically with that macro understanding of self. And so when women are doing deep women's work, women can relate to women in a way that men can't. Men can relate to men in a way that women can't relate. Now, that's not to say that we can't relate together and to each other in very specific ways. We can. And so when we start to heal, i.e. become whole, and we do that deeper work in our environments that are very familiar to us, we can then come together with a greater presence, with a greater understanding of who we are, with a greater love, an openness of heart and being. And so it's imperative and important that this young boy he's at a turning point right now, and he's at a place at the precipice of making some big decisions in his life. And often when we're wounded, we make unhealthy decisions. When we feel abandoned, when we feel that we're not approved of, we seek in extreme measures to gain that approval, to gain that validation. And so if he is surrounded by healthy men, he won't have this need to go to extremes to seek that validation and approval, such as taking drugs, being a menace to society, or going against the social norm, going against the grain, basically rebelling. In that shadow aspect of feeling sad and feeling lost and feeling shame, we go into rebelling. That's the shadow expression of that, because we feel so stuck, and we figure that if we can move in extremes, if we can really push the envelope here of this rite of passage of transitioning from boy to man, then I'll get the attention of my father. Then he'll love me. Then he will approve of me, because the risk taking that I'm engaged in is so high. And so it's critical that this young boy is surrounded by healthy, mature men that can guide him, that can nurture him, that can, with compassion, with empathy, with structure, that can lay out healthy challenges for him to focus on and grow, and know that he is not wrong for failing, but rather he can be empowered to grow through his difficulties. This is so, so important. Reassuring him, helping him develop, and teaching him to cultivate a healthy sense of self from within himself as opposed to outside of himself, so that he doesn't become codependent and rely on his father for everything, or rely on other people, because that becomes a habit. We would then rely on other people for guidance, for help, for feeling better about ourselves, for validation, for approval. So we can move beyond that by knowing that the source of our own worthiness is from ourselves, and the actions that we take and the thoughts that we think. Helping normalize his thoughts about his shame and his guilt and his pain, not hiding any of that, allowing him to speak freely to that, to open up his heart to that. When I say normalizing, I'm not talking about that becoming his norm and that becoming his go-to, and that's his inner dialogue constantly. That's the stories that he's telling himself, but allowing himself to express without judgment. Because what will happen is eventually that story will dissipate. The pain around that will go. And so he has experienced a great deal of shame in his life. And it's now helping him move beyond that shame by being present to him, by showing him love, by being open to who he is, by asking him questions about who does he really want to be, and why is that important to him, and letting him get excited and creative and inspired by that, and speak freely to have that voice, to have that outlet, so that his voice is not stunted in the world, so that he doesn't withdraw and become meek and weak and passive in the world, but that he can be inspired and solid and stable and clear in the world. Give him that voice. Of course, there is a lot more to this, but that is a great starting point from my perspective. Power and blessings to you. I'll see you again soon.